Hi, my name is Oak with Oak Astrology School, and welcome to my channel. Today I am talking about something that I'm extremely passionate about and something that I find to be very helpful when you are analyzing an astrology chart, and that is out of bounds planets. In this particular video, I'm going to show you how to identify an out of bounds planet. And why would that even matter? So when you're looking at a natal chart that you pull up from like astro.com or your astrology software or astrocharts.com, any chart generator, you won't be able to tell if a planet is out of bounds because the indicator for an out of bounds planet is actually based on the uh, latitude from the equator. And when we're looking at the degrees of a planet, like let's say you have a planet at like 10 degrees Pisces, then you're looking at the longitude of that planet, the longitude based on the position on the ecliptic. So if you don't understand what I'm saying, don't worry about it. I'm going to show you all in just a moment. But what I'm saying is that in order to find an out of bounds planet, we need to use other tools. So maybe learning about out of bounds planets is a little bit more obscure, and that's just because it's not the most obvious thing when you look at a natal chart. But why is it important? Basically, when we're looking at anything in astrology, if you're a practicing astrologer or if you know a bit of astrology, then you understand this idea of planetary dignity, where certain planets are going to do well in certain signs. Venus does very well in her own signs of Libra and Taurus. She's considered to be exalted in Pisces. So in the signs of Aries and Scorpio, and also in Virgo, Venus has less dignity. She has the least amount of dignity, meaning that she is not able to express the qualities of relation, of connection, of the love and beauty and contentment that Venus represents. And so when it comes to an out of bounds planet, a planet that is out of bounds is also going to show us a very specific indicator in the sense that we look at Venus in her own signs like Libra or Taurus and we're like, okay, she's a Venus that is probably going to do well. It's going to have the capacity to relate to others. It's going to be able to form relationships. There's a natural capacity to experience pleasure. And then the opposite when she has less dignity. Now, a planet that's out of bounds is going to express, every planet has their natural expression of consciousness, it's their natural expression of energy. A planet that goes out of bounds is considered to be wild or unchecked. So let's say someone has a Venus out of bounds, it means that their experience of connectivity, their experience of even pleasure or what it means to relate to others is going to be very different from their experience of what is consensus. So maybe within their family, maybe within their culture, maybe within their society, they have a relationship to Venus that potentially is not as relatable. It's definitely a very interesting way a planet is going to express. And so an out of bounds planet, we already know that if a planet is out of bounds, it's going to be pretty interesting. There is going to be a story. It's really going to have a quality that is quite spectacular, actually. We're not going to use terms like good or bad because I think that when I'm approaching someone's chart and I'm doing analysis, I find it to just be quite interesting. Like everything is interesting. And so basically planetary dignity, when we look at a planet that's doing well or a planet that is kind of not able to express its qualities, we already have a very strong feeling of what this planet's expression is going to be in the person's life. There's always variables, but it definitely gives a very strong starting point. And that's why when utilizing tools like essential dignity and in the case of what we're talking about today, out of bounds planets, it really kind of gets you into that space of like having a strong hunch that this planet has a very special story in this person's life. So it already gives us that point of reference that we should start maybe poking and prodding in this part of in this person's life if we're in the consult setting. I think that it just gives that little hunch basically. And so yes, I'm excited to talk about this with you today, and I'm going to cut to some slides where I'm going to share some imagery so it's a little bit easier to follow along with what I'm saying. Alrighty, let's get into it. On the left, we have the zodiacal wheel, which we're all probably very familiar with. And so basically, when we're looking at a planet, this degree right? So here's Venus. It's at 28 degrees Sagittarius. And that is the degree of where it is in the sky based on the path of the sun. And that is the ecliptic plane. But basically, this is the longitude, which I'll explain why in a little bit. And when we're thinking about a planet that is out of bounds, we're actually thinking about a different measurement. And we actually can't see the latitude, which is what the declination is. And so the declination essentially is the latitude. And so we're going to have to use a different type of chart or a different type of measurement for that. And so that is found on astro.com. You can pull up a chart, and then under additional tables, you will find the declination tables, which you can see that there's the longitude, right? Venus at 28 degrees Sagittarius, but Venus's declination, which is the latitude that we're talking about, is 22 degrees south. And so the latitude is going to be a measurement of either north or south. And so every single planet, even body or point, is going to have a degree of declination. So as I was saying, you can't see that from the natal wheel that we're familiar with, but you can go on astro.com to additional tables. This is Astro Gold, and you can find this under the tab with all the different calculations. And then it's also visible on astrocharts.com, and it'll just say the declination at some point when you're looking on a page with the natal wheel. So this is really what we're looking at today. So basically, a planet that is out of bounds, it exceeds the degree of where the sun is going to be at its maximum declination, north or south. So that degree is pretty much 23 degrees and 26 arc minutes. Those are the measurements of space, north or south. So basically, in order to determine if a planet is out of bounds, we basically just need to remember the number degrees and 26 arc minutes. And if a planet is if a planet is exceeding that, then that just means that the planet is out of bounds. Like this is the chart of Angela Davis. And so we can see here that the Mars is out of bounds because the declination is 24 degrees north. And then the Pluto is out of bounds because it's 23 and 23 and 46 arc minutes northern declination. And all these other planets are below that maximum declination of the sun. So they're in bounds. Long-winded introduction, but I'm going to just talk about what that really means. So we are bound by the sun. All planets are bound by the sun. Every planet rotates around the sun. That is the order of the solar system. The sun determines what we can see and what we cannot, right? It determines night or day. So in terms of the out-of-bound planet, it goes beyond what is considered visible in the sense of what is consensus, right? If something goes beyond what everyone can see, then what does that mean for that planetary archetype? Yeah, it's going to be wild. It's going to maybe be unrestricted. It's going to act out of what is considered normal. And that's why out-of-bounds planets are actually really fascinating, because they're always going to have a wildness about them. They're always going to have a quality that is going to deviate from what is quote unquote normal. And so, thinking about Angela Davis's chart, which we're looking at, you can analyze Angela Davis's chart and find this wildness of intent and a wildness and a power when it's associated to thinking about her will, which we're very familiar with her long career as an activist, as an educator, as a writer, and as just a very well sought after mind. And so additionally, the Pluto is out of bounds. So we're looking at someone whose sole intent or even their deepest motivation is unrestricted, right? So we're actually looking at someone who's extremely, extremely freedom oriented, right? And even power oriented, which really speaks volumes about the entire body of her work, right? So we could have found that through natal chart interpretation, but now with the added layer of the out of bounds significations, it's like, whoa, it kind of guides us to look at the Mars and the Pluto. And then as we are doing, regular delineation, just looking at the natal wheel by itself, it's like, whoa, it adds so much to think about, really. And so this is really what I love about out of bounds planets. It's like, it's just, you just check if a planet is out of bounds, and we already know that that's a point of conversation, that's a point of focus in this person's life. And so basically, since we're bound by the sun, there's a little mini astronomy lesson. Since we are bound by the sun, the Earth rotates around the sun. That pathway of, from our vantage point, watching the sun travel through the sky throughout the year, that is the zodiac, essentially. It determines, what part of the sun's path, we are traveling through with that inherent length that we have. So the sun's path is the equivalent of the zodiac, basically. And so the Earth's axis, that 23.5 degree tilt is what creates our seasons, right? It is basically that 23.5 degree tilt is what gives us the variance of light throughout the year, which is essentially related to each of our seasons. And so the halfway point of the Earth's axis is the equator. And when we project out the equator into space, that is the celestial equator. So basically, the declination is going to be the distance of a planet or an object north or south of the celestial equator. So just a little bit of background so you can understand what it even means for a planet to be out of bounds. This is it. It goes beyond that 23.5 degree tilt that the sun creates for the winter solstice and the summer solstice. So I'm showing you more slides to kind of rein it in. And so here is the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. And so what we're looking at is the ecliptic plane. Notice how here is the ecliptic plane, the Earth bound to the sun. And then here is the celestial equator. And then here's the Earth's axis at 23.5 degrees. And so the path of the sun, the ecliptic plane, being aligned to the highest point that will reach on the Earth, which is going to be that northernmost degree of declination that the sun will reach that year. And so this is our summertime. This is where we're receiving the most light. And then, what we're looking at the bottom is that when the sun is going to reach that lowest degree of maximum declination, that's going to be the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere. For the southern hemisphere, that is the darkest time of the year, right, is receiving the least amount of light. And so basically, this highest point that the sun will reach, creating the longest days, that variance from the intersection of the ecliptic plane to the equator is 23.5. And also the Earth's tilt is also 23.5. So there is this, divine geometry that occurs, this sacred mathematics, which is a big part of what astrology is. And so just sharing what it looks like when it is the summer solstice, which is what we were looking at previously, right? The sun is aligned to the highest point that it's going to reach on in relation to the Earth's equator in the northern hemisphere. So that is going to be the Tropic of Cancer, actually. And then on the right, we see the sun and the ecliptic path being aligned to that lowest point of declination, and that would be winter in the northern hemisphere. And so, that is the Tropic of Capricorn, right? So even these parts of the Earth that we define it, they're based on that solar motion, the relationship to our seasons. And so, this is what we're referencing when we're talking about declination. And let's see here. So here's an example of what I was just talking about, but in a different way. So we are looking at a solar graph. This was taken in Hungary in 2014. This is tracking the sun's movement through the sky every single day for a year. And so you'll see here, this is going to be the highest declination of the sun in the year. So that would be the summer solstice. This would be the lowest declination. That would be the winter solstice. And then this middle point is going to be the equinoxes. When the sun moves through Aries, when the sun moves through Libra, we're going to see the sun moving through, probably a declination of 0 degrees, which this is going to be 23.5. This will be 23.5 south. So you kind of get what I'm saying. So if we can imagine sitting outside of your window every single day for a year, when it's the summertime, the sun will rise and set at its highest degree of declination. And when it's the winter, the sun will rise and set at its lowest degree of declination. And then just finally, one more example. This is what we're kind of looking at with the solar graph, but the sun's movement, it will start at 0 declination, 0 degrees declination. We know when it is Aries, there is equal parts night and day. So the sun is aligned to that equinox. The sun is aligned to the equator more so. And then when we reach the most northern declination, it will be the season of Cancer. And then when we go back to the equinox with Libra, the sun will be back to that 0 degrees declination point, but it's going to be starting to move south to its lowest declination at the winter solstice when the sun enters Capricorn. So yes, we think about 0 degrees of Capricorn, when it's that winter solstice, when we're thinking about the zodiac and the degrees of the zodiac, but there's also just that, there's declination based on the time of the year and what the sun is doing throughout the year. So the sun's declination is a lot more easy to predict because the sun is the center point of our world. So let's see, identifying out of bounds planets, they are going to have a declination exceeding the maximum declination of the sun of 23.5, or, it'll basically be like 23 degrees and 27 north or south. So exceeding 23 and 23 degrees and 26 arc minutes north or south. And so planets are going to go out of bounds closer to the signs of maximum declination. So a lot of times you're going to get planets that are closest to those signs of maximum declination, that they're going to go out of bounds more so. So definitely Cancer, Capricorn, we're going to get out of bounds planets, as well as Gemini, Sagittarius, and then Scorpio and Aquarius. A lot of times, a lot less, because they're more close to the equinoxes, if that makes sense. But you will not see out of bounds planets in Aries or Libra, because those are the equinox points, which are at 0 degrees declination. And so planets that go out of bounds, they're, as I kind of mentioned, they have their own cycle of declination. So the moon can go out of bounds for a period of like 9 years or so, and then it won't go out of bounds for a period of 9 years as well. And so within that 9-year period that it's going out of bounds, it will kind of travel out of bounds for a few days and then go back in bounds, and then leave being in bounds and go out of bounds for a few days. And so there will be kind of like these groups of people within particular generations that will more so have out of bounds moon, and then other people that will not as well. And so that's like quite an interesting thing. And so, yeah, each of the planets has their own declination cycle. And if you wanted a book that will have the declinations, the Michelson ephemeris that most of us might use to track planetary movement does not have a declination table, but declination tables can be found in Raphael's ephemeris And as I was saying, astro.com under additional tables and in any astrology program. So, yes. Alrighty, so thank you so much for watching this video on identifying out-of-bounds planets. I do specialize in this topic. I've taught lectures on it. I still continue to gather a lot of research. It's something that I'm deeply, deeply inspired by. It's something that I've really focused on in my client work. And so I hope that you enjoyed this. I will be posting more videos on the qualities of each of the out-of-bounds planets, so stay tuned for that. If you want to learn more about me, my name is Oak with oakastrologyschool.com. I teach astrology that is focused on healing, counseling, and using astrology as a tool for liberation. I have classes and courses on the full spectrum of natal astrology, as well as transits and predictive astrology. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much.